Okay, I promised I was going to talk about Dave Ramsey. So a couple of days ago, I was sent a link to a Dan McClellan response video. Dan McClellan is a biblical scholar, and I think scholar of ancient literature, maybe. Anyhow, he was doing a response video to. He was responding to a video of a fellow by the name of Dave Ramsey and his co-host. Dave Ramsey he's a professing Christian who is a financial advisor. I believe he has like a radio show and a podcast where he offers financial advice to Christians in general, I think, but I think to anybody. Anyhow, this one series of questions that was presented to him that he responded to was about, well, really what it came down to was wealth, I think. Okay. The question in particular was, is it greedy to own 20 homes? Okay. Now, as I watched the video, I watched Dan McClellan's response, and it was always good. As always, it was really good. And then I went and I watched the video for myself, and whereas I would agree with the things that Dan said, I come at things a little bit differently. Where he's an academic, he is a biblical scholar. I'm neither. I'm a pastor, and so I wanted to look at this from a pastoral perspective. And if I had a congregant come to me and say, "Is it greedy to own 20 homes?" How would I respond? And how would I respond if that congregant interacted with me by using some of the things that Dave Ramsey said? So, first I would say, I don't know if it's greedy for you to own 20 homes, because I don't know why you own 20 homes. I don't know if this is something that you need to do. I don't know if it is. Is it a matter of greed that you just want more and more and more and more and more? That's it. I want it all. Is it because your grandfather died and left you his wealth because he was greedy and he had 20 homes and he gave them to you? I have no idea why you own those 20 homes. So I'm not going to jump in and say it's greedy. Only you can say if it's greedy or not. So if you're doing it because you want more and more and more for yourself, for your prestige, for your bank account, for your wealth, you want to gain more and more and more for your, because you're afraid of the future, then yeah, I'd say that's greedy. You're being greedy. If your granddad gave it all to you, your grandmother gave it all to you, that's not necessarily greedy. But if you won't give it up because you want to be rich, then yeah, that's greedy. Right? If you're holding on to it because it's a matter of being rich, then yes, that too is greedy. The question for me, if I were having that conversation with someone, would be not only why do you own it, but the question I think ultimately comes down to, is it sinful to own 20 homes? Is it sinful to own 20 homes? Now, Dave Ramsey, his response was, well, I own, I don't even know how many homes I own. Let's say 15. It might be more than that. And I own a bunch of commercial property as well. But actually, he said, I don't own it. God owns it. All right, man, that's awesome. Is God on the deed? Is God on the deed of that property? If your name's on it, you own it. Okay, if your name's on it, you own it. It's yours. Period. It's yours. You don't get to say God owns it, unless. So again, if I were having this conversation with a parishioner or with a client who's having this has these questions, you can't claim God owns it unless God receives all the proceeds. So yes, in our world we can't write on the mortgage God, and you can't write on the title God, on the deed you can't write God. God's name's not going on the property taxes. It's my name that's going to be on them. If there's 20 homes out there and I own them, then they're mine. My name's on them. And but I own them for God. My name's still on them. I'm still responsible for them. So therefore, if I own those 20 homes, are the proceeds all going to God? Or am I being enriched by it? Are the proceeds going to God, or am I being enriched by it? And I was thinking about what would that even look like? I was like, okay, so I own 20 homes. I live in one. I can only live in one. So I own 20 homes. I live in one. The other 19 are all financed. They have mortgages. There is a cost to owning them. There's maintenance and that kind of thing. So if I were renting those homes out to people, whether they're families or individuals, if I were renting those homes out at cost, then I might be able to say I own those, that with those properties I am glorifying God. We're going to take God out of the ownership equation. I'm glorifying God with those homes. That I own them, but I've dedicated them to God. I own them, but I have given them over to a godly purpose. And that is that people have affordable housing. All they have to do is pay the cost. I make nothing out of this. And then my brain was like, yes, but as they pay the cost, you are gaining the equity. And so you are still gaining wealth. It's not realized wealth. It's wealth that you would realize in the future with a sale. But, okay, you still are gaining. You're gaining that equity. So therefore, how can I use the equity? How can I use the equity in a godly way? Do I sell it or do I give it away to the people who've lived there, who've paid the rent all those years? Do I sell it and give the proceeds to a charity? Right? Okay, fair enough. There's another consideration here that if I'm buying up all this property, am I making it more difficult for others to buy property? Am I making it more difficult for others to build up their assets? Am I getting in the way of their dreams, in the way of their hopes? There's lots of thought experimenting we can do with a question like this. At the end of the day, we're not to take more than we need. That's a pretty biblical principle. You take what you need. I mean, it goes all the way back to Moses. You take what you need, there'll be more provided for you tomorrow. Take what you need for today. Jesus, whenever he mentions rich people, it's rarely ever it is hey, this rich person, they're godly. It's usually he uses the example, the stories of rich people who are trying to gain wealth for themselves. It doesn't usually go very well. He points out that those who are trying to gain wealth for themselves are actually worshiping another god. Whether or not they're Christian, they're worshiping the god of mammon. They're worshiping the god of wealth and money, of assets, of possessions. And when you're doing that, you can't also be worshiping God at the same time. There's the story, and Dan McClellan sort of touched on this from a scriptural perspective. He mentions the story of the parable of the talents, where Jesus tells a story about a king who says to his 3 servants, "Here, you take 10, you take 5, you take 1. Now I'm gone. I'm going to be going away. When I come back, I'm going to want to hear what you did with it." King comes back after so much time. First guy says, "Well, I took your money and I invested it wisely, and here's my 10 pieces. Here's your 10 pieces back, and here's 10 more." The second guy says, "I did the same thing, man. Here's your 5, and here's 5 more." Third guy says, "I knew you to be a tough guy to deal with. I knew you to be a tough bargainer. I knew you to be somebody that has great expectations, and I didn't want to lose this money, so I buried it in the ground." And the story ends Jesus concludes the story by saying, and the king praised the first two. It took everything from that last fella and gave it to the first one. He praised the first two for their initiative. He praised the first two for their investment. He praised the first two for their success. And for the third, he's like, get him out of here. I don't want to see him anymore. Right? He's gone. He's dead to me. So you could see in that story maybe the idea that as we are blessed financially, we are supposed to take those financial blessings and we are supposed to multiply them. Sure, but you got to keep something in mind, that at no point in that story does the king ever say, here's a couple of bucks for your trouble. What those servants were using was the king's money. And what they returned was the king's money. They didn't get any for themselves. So in that story, there is no sense that we are supposed to build up a wealth for ourselves. So using that story to justify why I might own 20 homes, I think I would be using that story really poorly. I would be using that parable really poorly. Unless, of course, as I invest what God has given me, I am using the profits of that investment for God's purpose, for God's glory, in a godly way, which for me would be as an expression of loving my neighbor. Owning 20 houses so that I can gain personal wealth from it is sinful. It's selfish. Is it greedy? I don't know. That's a matter of motivation, but it is sinful and it is selfish and it is missing the mark. It is me taking what I have, taking what I've been given, taking the blessings that God has bestowed upon me, the fruits of my labor even, and it's me doing more for me. Unless I, with the profits of my investment, of how I am investing, how I've been blessed, and how I am investing the fruits of my labor, if I am using those proceeds for the betterment of my neighbors, for the betterment of my community, for the betterment of my world, if I am using the proceeds of those investments to love my neighbor around me, to make their life better, to make their life easier, to help carry their burdens. For those of you who carry your brothers and sisters' burdens, you are fulfilling the law. Whatever we've been given, whatever we have, ultimately, in a perfect world, would go towards, maybe we'll just go with that. Whatever we've been given, whatever we have in this world, in a perfect world, we would use to help carry the burdens of our brothers and sisters around us, to make their lives easier. And if we're not using the things that God has given us towards that end, then we're missing the mark. We're missing a perfect opportunity. We're missing a perfect opportunity to show our love and appreciation for God. And we're missing the mark. We're not doing what we could be. And this, I think, is especially true when we build up for ourselves our wealth, and when we build up for ourselves assets, and we build up for ourselves properties. The more success we have, the more financial success we have, the more wealth we gain for ourselves, the greater responsibility we have to carry those around us. And that's not just charity, folks, right? That's not just about being charitable. That's about carrying them. How can I carry you? How can I carry your burdens? How can I lighten your load? God has blessed me immensely with money and with properties and with jets and with cars, with health. God has blessed me immensely with material things. How can I help you? How can I lighten your burdens? How can I lighten your load? How can I help you live this life more like I am living this life? Whereas having 20 houses may not be a sign of greed. It's indicative that I'm missing the mark somewhere. Somewhere really, really important. It's indicative that I've missed a key component of Jesus' teachings. Amen.